So let's say I went back to the drawing board, even got out my sketch pad, came up with what I think is a better idea. Maybe it's not the best yet, but I gave myself an area here where the image will always be centered in, and then an area that's clearly for the description and the forward and backward buttons. Much more organized than here. So now I'm at the point where I want to get back to my client, so to speak. I promised them I would give them two different directions that we could go in. And as far as for you in the class, that would mean it's time to blog your classmates with the two different ideas. So I don't quite have two different ideas yet. If we back up here, Command minus, I have one solid idea that starts with this home page and takes me down into these ways of showing my portfolio. I think another idea was probably this right here, where it had a totally different interface to it. But rather than give my client or my classmates the same color scheme, I decided to make another copy of this page and just go with more of a grayscale. So now what I need to do is I have two variations of a home page that I'm happy to show. Now I need to come up with variations of the way a secondary page, and in my case would be a portfolio. So I'll get to work on that. So I'll start by making a copy of this page, rearranging what the active page is by making that white, and then let's save ourselves some time rather than having to go to the folder system and bring out an image. Let's see if we can't just copy one from over here. So I'll command minus to make that a little bit smaller, but this is one image that I need here. So what I can do is click on it. I can tell that it's selected over here because I have auto select on. And what I'm going to do is hold down the option key, and if you look at my mouse you can see it gets that little doubling effect over it. So I'll go like that and drag, and you can see that now I have a copy, and then I'll further click and drag and take this copy over here. Now one interesting thing I should point out while we're doing this is that watch what happens here if I go off of any art design. I actually get this layer all by itself up here on the top, and as soon as I go over any artboard, it automatically starts to become masked inside of that artboard, which is great, makes the workflow really quick. But what if you actually for some reason needed that to show up half and half, like maybe you were making, I don't know, notes or something over here? Let me show you. There's a new tool or a new little icon here that came along with the artboards, and it's this right here. It's got a really long title to it, but it prevents the item from nesting in the artboard. So if you click that, it means it's always going to stay here outside of any artboards. So if I close all my artboards up, you can see I've got this just all by itself. And now if I went over half and half, it doesn't go in there. Not what we want in this case, but worth pointing out. So I uncheck that, and then once I just start to move it a little bit, it'll drop inside of there. So then we can repeat that with this image. We quickly see this white background creates a problem with a lot of my images. If I would have had a lot of images with black backgrounds, and I do have one at least, black won't be the answer. So we'll think up some ideas for that, maybe a medium gray. Which is what this is, so that would have to change. But one thing at a time, let's get the text for each of these and figure out what we're going to do with that. So once again, if we click on that, make sure that we have it selected. I'm going to Command unZ that, or Command Z undo that. But here, once again, I can hold down the option key, drag, so that I see that I have a copy of that, and then bring it all the way over into here. And then do the same thing for here. So after experimenting a bit, I found out that I could make the info over here work. It seemed like this got in the way at first, but after taking a critical look at it, I think really the work should shine over here in anything that shows up in here is in the way. So I'll try to find a nice spot for that back over here. Might have to make the color just a little darker so it's not completely lost. Let's talk about how you recolor a shape like this after it's already created. I just went and copied these from over here, but of course it brought that color scheme in. So in order to recolor these, it's not as simple as it is with a basic shape. Like a basic shape like the sidebar here, all I have to do is select it, go to properties, and it shows me the color, and then I can click on it and I could easily change it. And of course I'll undo that. But if I select a shape here, one of these custom shapes, I can't just click and get it to pop open. So I'll show you this little trick here. So here's our two shapes. Maybe we can rename those to make it more obvious what's what. So let's start with the left arrow. I'm going to go ahead and select it. And then I'm going to go down here to this little half circle icon or half colored circles icon. And it's to create a new fill or adjustment layer. I'm going to click on that. And what I'm going to select is a solid color. And then I'm going to pick the color that I want to change that to. So let's say I want to try just shy of a medium gray color for that. So I'll click right here, and you can see at first it looks like a disaster. It covers the whole thing with this color. But now if I right click on this layer and I select clipping mask, it automatically ducks under the layer that it's above, and it only has an effect on that. And then once I've done that, I can go ahead and change this just by double clicking here. And to make it real obvious what's happening here, I can pick a brighter color. And then, so just for you to see that one more time, I'm going to click on the layer. This time I'm going to go after the right arrow. I'm going to click here so that I can make a new layer, adjustment layer. And then I'm going to select solid color. I'm going to pick the color, and again I'll just kind of go crazy here. And then I'm going to right click. I'm going right over to where the name is. Going to hold down, well, I'm going to right click on a Mac, or I mean on a notebook computer. You would control click on it, and then you're going to select create clipping mask, and that just clips just that area. And then at any time all we have to do is click on the color here, and we can pick just the right color so that it's not too dark, not too light. Once you've done that, moving one of these items is not as easy as just clicking on it with auto select. You do have to select both entities, both the fill color and the arrow itself, and then you can go ahead and move them around. And then if we wanted to copy these two arrows down here to avoid having to do all that work again, we need to select all four of these. And remember, the way to select items that are what they call contiguous, one after another, select the first one, hold down the shift key, select the last one. And the way to select things that are non-contiguous is you would click one, hold down the command key, and then you can click another, then you can click another, then you can click another. And then you just want to hold down the option key so you get that double arrow, click and drag down. If you want to constrain it so it can't move left and right, hold down the shift key. That way, whichever is greater, left or right or up or down, it will constrain the most obvious movement. So in other words, if I was trying to copy a copy over here and I wanted them to line up, holding down the shift key will keep me aligned left to right. But if I break that and I start to go, well, actually I have to release the option key to do that in Photoshop, or the shift key. When I hold down the shift key again now, it constrains it to just up and down. Okay, so let's address the issue of the white background not working with these images that also have a white background. So one fairly obvious solution would be to just put a background that's very dark. But just to show my client, or in this case my classmates, that I've really thought everything out, I don't want to do another dark background. In the end I may decide on that, but in the issue of growing as a graphic designer, let's see what else we can do. So I'll go back to just a plain white background. One technique would be to put the equivalent of a stroke all the way around these images, like say a black stroke. And you could do that either by going back and manipulating the original image. You could also put something that looks like a stroke, like maybe a subtle drop shadow. So I'm going to show you how to add a drop shadow to basically any layer that you have in here. But one word of caution is drop shadows and gradients. If you ask any creative director that looks at a lot of portfolios, they would say that those are the most misused or overused things by beginning graphic designers. So if you use them, have a good reason to use them. Have them really be necessary. And in this case, that may just be the case. So here is one of those images. I can tell by toggling the eyeball on and off. So what I'm going to do is it's almost like what we did before where we added a adjustment layer, but in this case we're going to add what's called a layer style. So you click on this FX button and then you pick the thing that's closest to what you want. So in this case we're going to pick drop shadow. And you can see that we actually get all the options again here that we could choose from inside of here. And then we have some default options that come up for our drop shadow. And you can see if I move this out of the way, I get a bit of a preview of it. And I just have to select the most appropriate angle. And it probably helps to be consistent. So here, I want the sun to kind of look like it's coming from here and the rest of it to be shadowed out. So I'll see if that doesn't work for me here. So I'll choose an angle of about 180 degrees here. And you can see just by experimenting with these controls in here, you can quickly customize a drop shadow. In fact, if you take the spread all the way up and the size quite a ways down in the distance down, you can see that you quickly end up with something that looks a lot like you just put a little stroke around it. I don't want to quite go for that, but I don't want too aggressive of a shadow either. So I'm going to go with a fairly high spread, but a very small size and distance on the shadow. And we'll see what that looks like. So now, if we collapse this here, or actually all we have to do, remember the little trick of the option click, and that'll bring that one into focus, and we can see that we have that. I don't really like that much. The other thing you can see is that there was an awful lot of cast of the color against the background that this was shot, so this image would have to be taken into Photoshop, especially if it goes against the lighter background. If you don't like the drop shadow that you just created, just go back to the layer for the 12 bar and for your image, and then you can see you can get a preview here of what it looks like before and after just by toggling the eyeball on and off. And if you want to get in there and tweak it a little bit, just double click. Takes you right back into the editing selections. I soften that up a little bit, and then we'll go ahead and we'll apply the same thing to this image. So at this point I have two designs that I could share with my client. So this being design number one, and then this, and then jumping to here and here being design number two. So maybe at this point I want to go grab some lunch and come back with a fresh eye, look at these, see if there's any changes I can make to make these better. And then in the next video we'll talk about how you would either be able to email these to your client, or in our case put them up on the blogs to share them with our classmates.